Maria Delgado had learned, a long time ago, that the world was not built for women like her. She had learned it the morning she watched her husband walk out the door of their small two-bedroom apartment in San Antonio, leaving behind a half-empty coffee mug, a pile of unpaid bills, and their 3-year-old daughter, Lily, who was sleeping in the next room with her tiny fist pressed to her cheek. Maria had stood in the kitchen for a long time that morning, not crying, not screaming, just standing very still. Because when everything falls apart, sometimes the only thing you can do is stand. That had been 2 years ago. Lily was 5 now, and Maria was 29, and every single day between that morning and this one had been a war she had fought quietly and without applause. She worked as a housekeeper for Hargrove Estates, a private cleaning company that serviced the wealthiest homes in Dallas, Texas. Her shift started at 6 in the morning and ended whenever the job was done, which was usually closer to 7 at night. She wore a gray uniform with her name stitched on the left breast pocket, and she carried a caddy of cleaning supplies that smelled like lavender and bleach, and she moved through the houses of the rich the way a ghost moves through walls, present, necessary, and entirely invisible. She was invisible to the homeowners. Invisible to the clients who sipped their morning coffee in silk robes and didn't look up when she came in. Invisible to the doormen who held the door open for her cart but not for her eyes. But she was not invisible to Lily. Lily, who every evening when Maria came home would run from the small living room of her grandmother's house, Maria's mother, Rosa, who watched Lily during the day, and throw her arms around Maria's waist and say, "Mama, you smell like lemons." And Maria would press her nose into Lily's curly dark hair and breathe until the day fell off her like rain. Rosa was 63 years old and had bad knees that clicked when she walked, and she never once complained about watching Lily. She made rice and beans on the stove every evening and kept the television on low and taught Lily songs in Spanish that Maria herself had forgotten. It was a small life, their life, but it was built with love, and that made it large in the ways that mattered. Maria had one day off a week, Sunday. On Sundays, she took Lily to the park, or to the library where story time was free, or sometimes just to the Dollar Tree where Lily would walk every aisle with her eyes wide, as if she were in the Louvre. Those Sundays were the things Maria worked toward all week. They were her fuel. But this particular Thursday was a day that would change everything, though Maria did not know that yet. She arrived at her last assignment of the day at 4:30 in the afternoon, a penthouse on the 42nd floor of a gleaming tower in downtown Dallas called the Meridian. It was the kind of building where the elevator opened directly into the apartment, where the floors were white marble that echoed, where the ceiling-to-floor windows looked out over the city, like a god looking down at something it had made. The penthouse belonged to a man named Elliot Hargrove. Not Hargrove Estates, that was his late father's company, one of dozens he'd inherited. Elliot Hargrove was 37 years old, the CEO of Hargrove Global, a private equity firm that managed assets worth over $4 billion. His face had been on the cover of Forbes twice. His name was attached to buildings, foundations, university wings. He was, by every external measure, a man who had everything. What he actually had, Maria would come to understand, was a fortress he lived inside of alone. She had cleaned this penthouse 4 times before. She knew the layout by heart. The open kitchen with its restaurant-grade appliances that were almost never used, the master bedroom with the king bed that always looked barely slept in, the home office where the desk sat under a warm lamp and papers were always stacked in careful, anxious order. She knew that he drank his coffee black and left the mug exactly 2 inches from the edge of the counter. She knew that he kept a framed photo on the bookshelf, a woman and a small boy, neither of whom she'd ever seen in the penthouse, and that the frame was always turned slightly to the side, as if he couldn't bear to look at it directly, but also couldn't look away. She did not know his story. She did not ask. That was the rule of invisibility. You did not ask, you did not look too long, you did not exist in any way that required acknowledgement. But on this particular Thursday, something had happened that broke every rule Maria had ever followed. Lily was sick. Not terribly sick, just a fever of 100.2 and a runny nose and the kind of clingy, weepy misery that only strikes 5-year-olds. But Rose's knees had been bad this week, worse than usual, and Maria had no one else. So she had done the thing she had promised herself she would never do. She had called her supervisor, Patricia, and she had asked, her voice very small, if she could bring Lily to the last job of the day. Just this once. Patricia had been quiet for a long moment. The Hargrove penthouse is a zero-disturbance assignment, Maria. You know that. I know. She's very quiet. I'll keep her right with me. Another long pause. 1 hour. In and out. And if anyone says anything, I didn't know about it. Maria had driven to the Meridian with Lily in the back seat, wrapped in her purple dinosaur blanket, holding her stuffed rabbit named Senor Hoppy, her eyes half-closed and glassy. "We're going to Mama's work, baby," Maria had said. "You're going to sit nice, okay?" "Okay, Mama," Lily had said, in the small, obedient voice of a child who understood, even at 5, that her mother did not ask for things lightly. They went up in the private elevator together, Maria with her caddy, Lily with Senor Hoppy, and her blanket. The penthouse was empty. Mr. Hargrove was at his office, as he always was. Maria had the key code. She got to work immediately. Living room, kitchen, bathrooms. She was fast and efficient. Lily sat on a little section of the hallway floor Maria had spread a small towel over, playing quietly with Senor Hoppy, pretending the rabbit was sick too, and she was the doctor. Maria was in the master bathroom, scrubbing the shower tiles, when she heard Lily say, very clearly, from somewhere deeper in the apartment, "Oh, a paper." Maria turned off the faucet. "Lily," she called. "I found a paper, Mama." Maria walked quickly toward her daughter's voice and found Lily standing just inside the doorway of the home office, holding a thick manila envelope that had apparently slipped from the edge of the desk and fallen behind the trash can. Lily was looking at it with the serious, furrowed expression she always wore when she found something she considered important. "Baby, put that down," Maria said immediately, crossing the room. "We don't touch Mr. Hargrove's things." "But it was on the floor," Lily said reasonably. "Things on the floor need to be picked up." "You on the front," in neat printed handwriting, were the words, "Grant proposal, final copy, do not lose." Maria felt a small twist always say. Maria almost smiled despite herself. She gently took the envelope from Lily's hands and placed it carefully on the desk, right in the center where it would be clearly visible. It was sealed, thick, of something in her stomach. She didn't know what it meant. She returned the envelope to the desk, took Lily's hand, and went back to finish the bathroom. She did not know, as she scrubbed and rinsed and mopped, that the envelope in her daughter's small hands contained the thing that would unravel Elliot Hargrove completely, and then, somehow, put him back together again. Elliot Hargrove arrived home at 9:47 that evening, which was early for him. He loosened his tie in the elevator and pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes for exactly 3 seconds, a habit he developed, this counting of quiet moments before entering the place he called home but did not feel at home in. Then the elevator doors opened and he walked into the penthouse and flicked on the lights, and the white marble gleamed and the city sparkled 42 floors below, and it all looked like something from a magazine about the life you were supposed to want. He poured 2 fingers of scotch and stood at the window and drank it. His phone had 34 unread emails. His assistant had called twice. His board chairman had left a voicemail that began with the words, "Elliot, we have a situation." He looked at all of this and felt the same thing he always felt at the end of the day in this apartment, a vast, echoey nothing. The way an empty concert hall sounds. A space built to be filled that isn't. It had been 3 years since the accident. 3 years since he had stood in a hospital corridor while a doctor explained, in careful and compassionate language, the things that could and could not be fixed. 3 years since he had signed documents and made arrangements and driven away from a place he never went back to. 3 years of working 16-hour days because work was the only place where he knew exactly what he was and what he was for. He did not talk about it. Not with his board, not with his assistant, not with the 3 friends who had tried, in the first year, to check in on him regularly before his silence trained them out of it. He had built the fortress carefully, brick by brick, and he lived inside it, and called it coping. He walked through the apartment, force of habit, checking the rooms the way people do when they come home to emptiness, making sure the emptiness is at least consistent. Kitchen clean. Living room, clean. The cleaners had been today. He could smell the lavender. He went to his office last. He sat at his desk and opened his laptop and then, by accident, his elbow nudged the stack of papers to his left, and one of them slid, and as he reached to catch it his eyes dropped to the center of the desk and stopped. The manila envelope. He stared at it for a moment, very still. Then he picked it up with both hands carefully, the way you pick up something you're afraid of. He had been looking for this envelope for 6 days. 6 days of tearing apart his office, his briefcase, his car. 6 days of retracing every step. 6 days of avoiding telling his assistant, because telling his assistant would mean admitting that he, Elliot Hargrove, a man who ran a $4 billion firm, had lost a single piece of paper. Except it wasn't a single piece of paper. It was the grant proposal for the Hargrove Family Foundation's new initiative, a pediatric rehabilitation center he'd been privately funding in memory of his son, Connor, who had died in the car accident 3 years ago at age 4. The proposal was due to the city planning board in 48 hours. Without it, the project was delayed. Without it, 3 years of work, of quiet, private grief channeled into something that might help other children who went through what Connor had gone through before the end, was set back by months. He had turned this office inside out looking for it. And here it was, in the exact center of his desk. He turned the envelope over in his hands, confused. It hadn't been here this morning. He was certain. He had looked on this desk this morning with desperate and thorough eyes, and it had not been here. He thought about the lavender smell. The cleaners. He stood up and went to the kitchen where the cleaning service left their sign-in sheet, a small clipboard hung by the door. He looked at the name written there in neat, careful handwriting. Maria Delgado. 4:30 to 5:45 p.m. He stood there for a long time, holding the clipboard, turning the name over in his mind. Then he set it down and went back to his office and sat down and opened the envelope and checked that everything was inside, all 43 pages, organized exactly as he had left them. And then he sat back in his chair and did something he had not done in a very long time. He put his face in his hands, not because he was sad exactly, or not only because of that. He put his face in his hands because a woman named Maria Delgado, who cleaned his apartment for probably $12 an hour, had found the most important thing in his world and placed it at the center of his desk so he would see it, and had said nothing and asked for nothing, and had simply done a small and decent thing in the dark. And something about that cracked him, right down the middle. He thought about Connor. He always thought about Connor. But tonight he thought about Connor, and also about the grant proposal and the little rehabilitation center it would fund, and about the fact that he had been running away from that project for 6 months, approving it on paper, funding it, but never actually going to see the site, never speaking to the staff, never letting it be real, because making it real meant something he wasn't ready for. And he thought, enough. He opened his laptop and he started to write. Maria did not expect to hear from anyone about the envelope. She had put it on the desk, it was on the floor, it belonged on the desk, that was the end of the story. She had gone home that evening, given Lily a bath and children's Tylenol and a bowl of chicken soup her mother had made, and put her to bed, and sat on the edge of the mattress in the dark listening to her daughter breathe until the tight knot in her chest finally loosened. Then she had fallen asleep sitting up, which was the way she often fell asleep, not lying down in peaceful surrender, but sitting, slightly braced, the way soldiers sleep. The next morning she was on the bus to her first assignment when her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Unknown numbers were usually debt collectors or robocalls, but something made her pick up. Is this Maria Delgado? The voice was male, measured, the kind of voice that was used to being listened to. Yes, she said carefully. My name is Elliot Hargrove. You cleaned my apartment yesterday. Maria felt her stomach drop. The envelope. Had she done something wrong? Had she put it in the wrong place? Had she accidentally? Mr. Hargrove, she said quickly, if there's an issue with the apartment, I apologize. Patricia at Hargrove Estates can. There's no issue, he said. I'm calling because you found something that was very important to me, and you returned it, and I wanted to thank you. Maria blinked. Outside the bus window, Dallas moved past, gray and early morning. It was on the floor, she said. I just put it on the desk. Yes, he said. And then, strangely, he was quiet for a moment. You didn't have to place it somewhere I'd see it. You didn't have to be careful with it. You just were. Maria didn't know what to say to that. She adjusted her caddy bag on her lap. I was doing my job, she said. I know. But I'd like to do something for you, if that's all right. I'd like to send a bonus payment to you personally, not through the company. Maria stiffened. That's not necessary, Mr. Hargrove. I know it's not necessary. I'd like to anyway. I appreciate that, but no thank you. She said it politely but clearly, the way her mother had taught her. You decline with grace, but you decline with spine. I don't need a reward for doing the right thing. Another pause. When he spoke again, something had shifted slightly in his voice. Something quieter and less rehearsed. Can I ask you something? She hesitated. Okay. How long have you been cleaning houses? It was such an unexpected question that she answered before she could stop herself. 6 years. And, do you like it? She thought about that honestly. Some days, she said. Some houses have light that comes in and makes everything golden in the afternoon. And some of the clients leave flowers on the counter that smell nice. And I'm good at it. She paused. I like being good at something. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, You brought someone with you yesterday. A child. Maria's hand tightened on the phone. I'm sorry. She was sick and I had no one. It won't happen again. Patricia doesn't know. I'm not calling about that, he said, and he said it so gently, so without any edge of threat or disapproval, that Maria actually stopped mid-sentence and had to recalibrate. I could hear her playing in the recordings on the home security system. She sounded like she had a good imagination. Maria let out a breath. She's the most imaginative person I've ever met, she said, and the pride in her voice was involuntary and total. She's 5. She turns everything into a story. What's her name? Lily. He said it once very quietly, like someone handling something fragile. Lily. Then he said, Thank you for finding the envelope, Ms. Delgado. It mattered more than you know. And he hung up. Maria sat on the bus for a long time after that, looking out the window at the city waking up. Something felt different, but she couldn't have said what. Like a stone had been moved, somewhere. Like a small, unexpected door had swung open, just an inch, in a wall she hadn't known was there. She didn't tell anyone about the call. She went to her first house and her second and her third. She cleaned bathrooms and kitchens and made beds and scrubbed baseboards and carried her caddy room to room, and she did all of it with the particular focus of a person whose mind is slightly elsewhere. At lunchtime, she sat in her car in a parking lot and ate the sandwich she'd packed and checked on Lily, who was feeling better and had apparently spent the morning convincing Rosa that Senor Hoppy had a broken leg and needed surgery. She laughed out loud, alone in her car, and the laugh was real and warm and unself-conscious. She did not know that Elliot Hargrove, 42 floors up in his penthouse, was sitting at his desk reading a grant proposal about a place called the Connor Hargrove Pediatric Rehabilitation Center, and for the first time in 3 years, was letting himself cry. 2 weeks passed. Maria did not clean the penthouse again. The schedule rotated, and she told herself the strange morning phone call was simply a strange morning phone call and nothing more. Rich people sometimes did unexpected things. That was all. But life, she had learned, rarely arranged itself in straight lines. On a Saturday morning, Maria took Lily to the park near their neighborhood, the small one with the green benches and the fountain that worked only sometimes. Lily wore her yellow rain boots even though it wasn't raining, because she was 5 and yellow rain boots were always appropriate. She ran immediately to the sandbox and began constructing what she called a hospital for dirt. Maria sat on a bench and let the morning be quiet around her. The sun was warm. Rosa had sent them out with a bag of pan dulce, and Maria was eating a pink sugar cookie and watching Lily work and feeling, for the first time in a while, like a person rather than just a function. Excuse me. She looked up. Standing a few feet away was a man she recognized immediately, even in jeans and a blue jacket, even without the context of a penthouse and white marble and the smell of scotch. Elliot Hargrove. He looked different here. Smaller, somehow, in the way that powerful people look smaller when they are removed from their power. He had dark circles under his eyes and the uncertain posture of someone who wasn't sure he was doing the right thing. "I'm sorry," he said. "I know this is strange. My assistant mentioned the park. I asked about you. I shouldn't have done that without telling you, and I apologize." Maria looked at him steadily. "Why did you ask about me?" He sat down on the far end of the bench, leaving a careful amount of space. He looked at his hands for a moment. "The envelope your daughter found," he said. "It was the proposal for a pediatric rehabilitation center. I'm building it in memory of my son." He said the last 4 words the way you say something you've practiced saying in private, so you can manage to say it in public. His name was Connor. He was 4 when he died. 3 years ago. Maria set down her pan dulce very carefully. "I'm very sorry," she said, and she meant it completely, the way only a mother can mean it, with a full-body understanding of what it would mean to lose a child, a knowledge so terrible you can only hold it for a second before you have to set it down. The proposal was for the final approval. If it had been lost, really lost, we'd have been delayed by months. He looked out at the park. But it also wasn't just practical. It was the first time I've looked at that project as real. As something that's going to exist and have Connor's name on it and help kids. He paused. "Your daughter found it. And you put it where I'd see it. And I can't stop thinking about that." Maria looked at Lily in the sandbox. "She has a gift," she said softly, "for finding things that have fallen where they're not supposed to be." Something passed across his face, a flicker of something raw and real. "I've been thinking," he said, "about what you told me, that you like being good at something." He turned to face her. "The rehabilitation center needs a facility manager. Someone to oversee the daily operations, the cleaning protocols, the family support services. It's not a corporate job, it's a ground-level job. It requires someone organized and hardworking and good at caring for spaces in a way that makes people feel safe." Maria stared at him. "I'm not offering you charity," he said quickly. "I'm offering you a job. A real one. With real pay and benefits and a schedule that doesn't start at 6 in the morning." He hesitated. "You can say no. Please say no if it's wrong." I thought." "Why?" she asked. He was quiet for a moment. Then, because Connor loved people. He loved anyone who was kind to him, any stranger who crouched down and talked to him like he was real. And I've spent 3 years building something in his memory while keeping everyone at a distance, and I think he'd have found a way to tell me that was wrong." Lily appeared at Maria's knee suddenly, sand on her boots and Senor Hoppy dangling by one ear. She looked at Elliot with a frank, unbothered assessment of a 5-year-old. "Are you the man from Mama's work?" she asked. Elliot looked at her. For just a moment, something crossed his face, so fast Maria almost missed it, a grief so familiar it looked like recognition. "Yes," he said softly. "I am." Lily held out Senor Hoppy. "This is Senor Hoppy. He had surgery, but he's better now." Elliot took the rabbit gently, with both hands, the way he'd held the manila envelope. He looked at it for a long moment. "I'm glad he's better," he said. His voice was very quiet. "Me too," said Lily. She took the rabbit back, tucked it under her arm, and ran back to the sandbox. Maria watched Elliot watch her daughter go. She could see the exact moment something in him became undone, not in a falling apart way, but in the way a fist unclenches. Slowly. With effort. With relief. "Tell me about the position," she said. The Connor Hargrove Pediatric Rehabilitation Center opened on a Tuesday in early April, when the Dallas weather was the kind of clean and golden that makes you forget the city is usually a furnace. It was a low, wide building with large windows and murals on the exterior walls painted by local schoolchildren, dinosaurs and flowers, and what appeared to be a rabbit wearing a doctor's coat that Maria strongly suspected was Senor Hoppy. Inside, the floors were warm wood rather than cold tile, because Maria had campaigned for that in the planning meetings, saying children lie on floors. Floors should feel safe. The waiting room had soft chairs and books, and a small indoor fountain that made a sound like a stream. Maria stood in the lobby on opening day in a charcoal blazer she had bought with her first real paycheck. The first paycheck in her adult life that didn't have to be divided before she could look at it, and she watched families come through the door, children in wheelchairs, Children on crutches, parents with the careful eyes of people who had been afraid for a long time and were trying to learn how to hope again. She knew those eyes. She had worn them. She greeted every family. She knew their names because she had learned them, the way she had learned every house she had ever cleaned, carefully, with attention, with respect. She knew which child was nervous and which child wanted to be treated like they were fine, and she knew which parents needed to be told, "Your child is safe here," before they could take a full breath. The facility ran the way good places run, not perfectly, not effortlessly, but with the kind of human care that makes people feel seen. Maria had built the intake process and the family support protocols and the volunteer coordination system and the cleaning schedule and the emergency procedures, and she had done all of it the way she had always done her work, with thoroughness and without fanfare. Rosa was there that day, sitting in a good chair by the window with her bad knees elevated, eating a piece of cake from the reception table and looking at her daughter with the expression of a woman whose prayers have been answered in a form she did not expect but recognizes as better. Lily was there too, in a dress the color of the sky, running up and down the corridor until Maria caught her and said, "We walk inside." And Lily said, "I know, Mama, I know," in a voice that meant she was going to walk for approximately 45 seconds before running again. Elliot was there. He stood slightly apart from the crowd most of the morning, not unfriendly, just cautious, still learning how to be in a room with people who needed things from him that weren't professional. But Maria had watched him over these months, the slow return of something in him, like a plant that had been kept in a dark room, finally being moved toward a window. At one point in the afternoon, she found him standing in front of the small memorial display they had built in the hallway, photos of Connor, a few of his drawings, a description of why the center existed. He was looking at a photo of a small dark-haired boy laughing at something outside the frame, and his hand was pressed flat against the wall beside it, the way you steady yourself when the ground moves. Maria stood beside him quietly. "He looks like someone who laughed easily," she said. "He laughed at everything," Elliot said. His voice was rough at the edges. He thought the whole world was hilarious. He used to laugh at birds. Just birds sitting on a wire. He'd see them and lose it. Maria smiled. "Lily laughs at weather," she said. "If it's windy, she thinks it's the funniest thing that's ever happened." Elliot looked at her. "How do they do that? How are children just like that?" "I think," Maria said carefully, "they haven't learned yet what's worth protecting themselves from. So, everything is just everything." He looked back at the photo. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then he said, "I almost didn't build this. Did you know that? I funded it and approved it, and then I kept it at arm's length. Because building it meant it was real, and if it was real, then he was really gone." "I know," Maria said quietly. "Your daughter's hands," he said, and he said it with the soft wonder of someone who has thought about this many times. A 5-year-old picked up a piece of paper off the floor. He shook his head. "And I'm standing here." Maria thought about the morning she had stood in her kitchen after her husband left, not moving, just standing still. She thought about the thousands of early mornings since then. She thought about Lily saying, "Mama, you smell like lemons." She thought about all the ways love sustains a person, quietly and without announcement, through the long years of learning to be brave. "I think," she said, "that the things that save us almost never look like what we expected." That evening, after the last family had gone, and the staff had cleaned up the reception and Rosa had been driven home by Maria's cousin, and Lily had fallen asleep across 2 chairs with Senor Hoppy on her face, Maria sat in the lobby alone for a little while. The building was quiet. The little fountain ran. Through the big windows, the city was doing what cities do at dusk, going amber at the edges, all that glass catching fire. She thought about a woman in a gray uniform with a caddy of lavender-scented supplies, moving invisibly through other people's spaces, carrying a life that most people couldn't have managed for a single week. She did not think of that woman with pity. She thought of her with something closer to awe, because that woman had raised the child whose hands, on an ordinary afternoon, had found what was lost, and had picked it up, and had done the small, decent, world-changing thing of simply putting it back where it belonged. Lily stirred in her chairs and opened one eye. "Mama," she said sleepily. "Right here, baby," Maria said. Lily closed her eye again and smiled, And Maria sat in the quiet center of the thing they had built, and for the first time in a very long time, she let herself believe that they were going to be okay. Not because the hardship was over, not because the world had suddenly become fair or soft or easy, but because some doors, when a small hand opens them, stay open, and the light that comes through is enough.